President Trump delivered a stunning, all-encompassing blow to Iran's nuclear program and destroyed it completely. And the next day, President Trump announced that the war between Israel and Iran was over. The United States and Israel have effectively achieved victory, accomplishing what they couldn't for nearly 20 years, the complete destruction of Iran's nuclear program, the creation of new conditions for peace, and forcing the Iranian leadership to enter negotiations and agree to a ceasefire. So let's take a look at what Donald Trump said and analyze how the situation developed and what the outcome will be. So, the situation around Iran's nuclear program suddenly escalated on Friday, June 13, 2025. As a result of failed negotiations, and based on a report from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the Israeli leadership decided to carry out a disarming strike on the infrastructure and facilities of Iran's nuclear program, and this began to be implemented. Fighter jets and bombers of the Israeli armed forces began striking targets on Iranian territory. Thus, the war began. So, the situation surrounding Iran's nuclear program suddenly escalated on Friday, June 13, 2025. As a result of failed negotiations, and based on a report from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the Israeli leadership decided to carry out a disarming strike on the infrastructure and facilities of Iran's nuclear program, which is now being put into action. Fighter jets and bombers of the Israeli armed forces began striking targets on Iranian territory. The war began while the military escalation was underway, as Israel was bombing Iran's nuclear facilities. The American administration projected a peaceful stance and called for negotiations. However, as we now know, behind the scenes of all these events, preparations were underway for the United States Armed Forces to strike Iranian nuclear facilities. Apparently, this required significant preparation and took quite a lot of time. President Trump told everyone that he would make a decision about launching strikes within 2 weeks. People were upset because Israel needed support. Israel was unable to achieve the objectives of its strikes during the initial raids because the underground facilities were dug deep into the rock, and Israeli weaponry couldn't penetrate them. President Trump showed no reaction or willingness to help. However, suddenly, a couple of days ago, President Trump published this post.
We have completed our successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Now is the time for peace.
President Trump triumphantly informed us that the U.S. Armed Forces had delivered a brilliant strike against 3 key facilities of Iran's nuclear program, the very sites that Israel had been unable to hit. And at the same time, he pointed out that now is the time for peace, and that military action should cease. After that, President Trump published another post in which he called on Iran not to respond or seek revenge.
Any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Thank you. Donald J. Trump, President of United States.
And not to carry out retaliatory strikes against U.S. armed forces in the region. Perhaps this had an effect because, in reality, Iran did not deliver a serious or immediate response to the bombings of its nuclear facilities. President Trump mentioned the U.S. Air Force pilots who carried out the strikes and were successful, and also tried to. President Trump specifically mentioned the B-2 aircraft pilots who carried out strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, and also noted that regime change in Iran could potentially help make Iran great.
It's not the politically correct to use the term regime change. But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make great Iran again, why wouldn't there be a regime change?
This was a reference to revolution, to the overthrow of the current regime in Iran. Next, President Trump went on to describe the damage that was inflicted on the Iranian nuclear sites. Let's take a look.
Monumental damage was done to all nuclear sites in Iran, as shown by satellite images. Obliteration is an accurate term. The white structure shown in deeply embedded into the rock, with even its roof well below ground level and completely shielded from flame. The biggest damage took place far below ground level.
Here, President Trump says that the satellite images clearly show the damage caused by the bombings to Iran's nuclear facilities. There is no doubt that the objective of the military operation was achieved. The nuclear facilities were destroyed. This is very important to point out, because journalists started saying that it wasn't a complete success, even though in reality it was a total success. What couldn't be done in 20 years was accomplished. Iran's nuclear program was completely destroyed. The next day, President Trump began urging oil producers to keep oil prices low.
First post. To the Department of Energy. Drill, baby, Drill. Second, everyone keep oil prices down. I'm watching.
This post indicated that something was being prepared and that a possible military response from Iran, or an Iranian strike on American military bases in the Persian Gulf region, could happen. In addition, President Trump mentioned former Russian President Medvedev in his post. Let's see what he said.
Did I hear former President Medvedev from Russia casually throwing around the nuclear and saying that he and other countries would supply nuclear warheads to Iran?
President Trump scolded former Russian President Medvedev for mentioning nuclear weapons as a means of pressure in his social media posts, which prompted an immediate response from Medvedev, who apologized. And in fact, the post was addressed to Russian President Putin, urging them to stop the nuclear blackmail because the consequences could be very dire. Among other things, it's no coincidence that President Trump mentioned Medvedev and Putin in connection with nuclear escalation. President Trump made it clear that Russia cannot engage in nuclear escalation and threaten other defenseless countries with nuclear weapons, because the United States will intervene and protect them. After that, President Trump published another post in which he listed the damage that had been inflicted on Iran's nuclear program.
The sites that we hit in Iran were totally destroyed, and everyone knows it. Only the fake news would say anything different in order to try and demean as much as possible. And even they say they were pretty well destroyed. Working especially hard on this falsehood is Allison Cooper of Fake News CNN, Dumb Brian L. Roberts, chairman of Comcast, Johnny Carl.
And also, strangely enough, he wrote this post in which he thanked Qatar for its peace efforts. Let's read it.
I'd like to thank the highly respected Emir of Qatar for all that he has done in seeking peace for the region.
This post thanking Qatar was a sign that things were moving toward peace. And literally just a very short time later, the next post appeared, the most important post from President Trump in this whole story. Let's read it.
Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire.
In this post, President Trump announced the end of the war, that the parties were moving toward a ceasefire, and that military actions between Iran and Israel would be stopped. Of course, this is a complete victory for Israel and the United States over Iran. And, of course, President Trump acts as if he is showing respect to the Iranian leadership in order to prevent an escalation of the military conflict. However, during these 12 days, as President Trump called it, the 12-day war, all the planned objectives of the military operation against Iran's nuclear program were achieved. The nuclear program was destroyed, and returning to it would only be possible in several decades, and that is the main achievement. In addition to this, Israel eliminated the top military command of Iran's army, which is also significant. The leaders of the nuclear program, who were true enemies, were also eliminated, and they were destroyed. This is an excellent result that was achieved in just 12 days. So, it can be said that this was the most successful war in recent decades, in which Israel and the United States achieved a decisive victory, even though it's not politically correct to say so. President Trump said that he thanks everyone and blessed Israel, Iran, and the Middle East on their path to peace. So, President Trump actually deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, because he managed to solve, in just a few days, problems in the region that had been building up for decades and, in principle, threatened all of humanity. Let's thank President Trump too. Thank you.